I 27F, lost my husband David, 29M, 6 months ago in a devastating car accident. As a software engineer at a major tech company in Silicon Valley, I've always been the reliable one in the family, though my parents never quite understood or appreciated my career choice. They've always favored my younger sister Abigail, 24F, and her artistic pursuits. The first few weeks after David's death were a blur of funeral arrangements and condolence calls. If it wasn't for my grief support group, I'm not sure how I would have managed. Every Tuesday evening, I'd sit in a circle with others who understood the hollow ache in my chest. Some days are harder than others, I'd share, my voice barely above a whisper. Sometimes I wake up and for a split second, I forget he's gone. After David's death, something unexpected happened in my relationship with my parents. Growing up, I'd always felt like an afterthought compared to Abigail. They never missed her art exhibitions or gallery openings, while my academic achievements barely warranted a good job. But suddenly, they started calling regularly, inviting me for weekly dinners, and showing an interest in my life that felt foreign yet comforting. Then came their request for financial help, a monthly transfer of $1,500 to support family expenses. Abigail was preparing for her first solo exhibition, they explained, and needed backing. Despite my initial hesitation, I agreed. David had left me well provided for, our house in a nice suburb, a downtown apartment we'd been planning to rent out, and a substantial life insurance payout. Plus, for the first time in my life, I felt truly seen by my parents. The weekly dinners at their house became a comforting routine. Mom would cook her signature lasagna, Dad would pour the wine, and we'd talk about everything and nothing. "Tell us more about that new project you're working on," Dad would say, showing genuine interest in my work for once. "The AI implementation is going well," I'd share, savoring these moments of connection. "My team thinks it could revolutionize our clients' workflow." But everything shifted the night Abigail joined us for dinner. My younger sister walked in, 7 months pregnant, her presence immediately commanding the room like it always had. I hadn't seen her since David's funeral, and the sight of her swollen belly hit me like a physical blow. "Sweetie, sit here." Mom fussed, practically pushing me aside to make room for her favorite daughter. "Do you need another pillow? Are your feet swollen?" Just like that, I became invisible again. "So, who's the father?" I asked during dinner, trying to join the conversation. "Have you told him about the baby?" Abigail's face darkened. "That's my business," she snapped, pushing her food around her plate. "I don't need to share every detail of my personal life." Mom jumped to her defense immediately. "Honey, don't pry. Your sister doesn't have to explain herself to anyone." I couldn't help but notice how different this response was from when I was going through fertility treatments with David. Back then, they'd had no problem demanding updates and offering unsolicited advice about my personal life. "But how are you planning to manage on your own?" I pressed. "Babies are expensive, even with the gallery starting to do well." Abigail waved her hand dismissively, that familiar smirk playing on her lips. "Don't worry about my baby. We won't need anything from anyone. I've got it all figured out." I should have paid more attention to that mysterious smile. I'd seen it too many times before, when she started her revolutionary NFT art platform that lasted 2 weeks, the art therapy certification she never finished, the cryptocurrency investment that lost her 3 months' rent. "Trust me," she said, patting her belly with an air of confidence that should have set off alarm bells. "This time everything is going to work out exactly as planned." Dad beamed at her like she'd just announced a cure for cancer. That's my girl, always landing on her feet. The call from Abigail came on a Tuesday morning. I was in my home office, debugging a complex authentication system when my phone lit up with her name. I almost let it go to voicemail. Our conversations were usually brief and awkward, but something made me answer. "Hey, sis," her voice had that sugary sweetness she only used when she wanted something. "I'm having my baby shower next weekend at Mom and Dad's. I'd really love it if you could come." The invitation caught me off guard. The last real conversation we'd had was at David's funeral, and even then she'd seemed distracted and uncomfortable. "Are you sure?" I asked, unable to hide my surprise. I could count on one hand the number of times Abigail had voluntarily included me in anything. Of course, she laughed, the sound oddly forced. You're my only sister. It wouldn't be right without you. Plus, she paused meaningfully, I have something special planned. Something in her tone made my stomach clench, but I pushed the feeling aside. I'll be there, I promised, already mentally listing possible gift ideas. Maybe this was her way of trying to bridge the gap between us. The following Saturday, I arrived at my parents' house carrying 2 carefully wrapped packages, a high-end baby monitor and a hand-knitted blanket. Despite our differences, this was my future niece or nephew. The place looked like a pastel explosion had hit it, rainbow balloons everywhere, streamers hanging from every surface, and a towering diaper cake centerpiece. Trust Abigail to turn this into an event worthy of a Silicon Valley startup launch party. She'd invited what looked like half the town. Aunt Lucy was there with her daughters, Mom's book club friends occupied the sofa, and Abigail's old college roommates clustered around the punch bowl, giggling over some shared memory. Time for games. Abigail announced, wading through the crowd in a flowing maternity dress that probably cost more than my monthly AWS budget. She was glowing, but there was something predatory in her smile that made me uneasy. Her eyes kept finding mine across the room, holding my gaze a beat too long. We played all the traditional baby shower games, measuring Abigail's belly with string, guessing the baby's birth date, and that horrible melted chocolate bar in diaper game. I won the belly measuring contest, which seemed to irritate Abigail more than it should have. Throughout it all, she kept shooting these strange looks my way, like she was waiting for something. After the gifts were opened, Abigail cooing over each onesie and baby gadget with theatrical enthusiasm, she reached my presence. She held up the blanket, running her fingers over the intricate pattern, then clinked her glass for attention. The room fell silent, and my heart started racing for no reason I could name. The air felt suddenly thick, hard to breathe. I want to thank everyone for coming today, she began, one hand resting on her swollen belly. But there's something else I need to share. I think it's time everyone knew who the father of my baby is. My heart started pounding. Abigail's eyes locked onto mine, and in that moment, I knew. I knew before the words left her mouth, but that didn't lessen the impact. The father, she said, her voice ringing through the suddenly silent room, is David Wilson. My sister's late husband. The world tilted sideways. Through the roaring in my ears, I could hear gasps and whispers from the guests. Aunt Lucy's hand flew to her mouth, Abigail's college friends huddled closer together, whispering frantically. But what hit me hardest was the lack of surprise on my parents' faces. They had known all along. Before I could process what was happening, Abigail was already speaking again, her voice dripping with satisfaction as she turned to face me directly. As David's baby is his only heir, I'm entitled to half of everything he left you. The house, the downtown apartment, the life insurance money, my child deserves their father's inheritance. The room spun. I gripped the back of a chair to steady myself, but then Mom and Dad stepped forward, flanking Abigail like bodyguards. Honey, Dad said, using his stern business voice, you need to do the right thing here. Your nephew deserves his father's legacy. You're lying, I found my voice, though it came out as a rasp. All of you are lying. David would never. Oh no. Abigail's smile turned cruel as she pulled out her phone. Then how do you explain these? And my world collapsed all over again. There they were, David and Abigail wrapped in each other's arms, kissing in what looked like a hotel room. Another photo showed them holding hands in a restaurant I didn't recognize. He loved me, Abigail declared, her voice carrying across the silent room. He was planning to leave you for me. We were going to tell everyone, but then. She choked, looked up, tears streaming down her face, then the accident happened, and all our plans. I couldn't breathe, couldn't think. My body moved on autopilot, gathering my purse, pushing past the whispering guests, stumbling out to my car. I heard Mom calling after me, but I was already backing out of the driveway. The drive home was a blur, my mind kept replaying those photos, trying to make sense of them. The restaurant photos must have been taken during those late nights at the office he claimed to have. The hotel probably during his frequent business trips to our satellite office. My phone started buzzing as soon as I walked through my front door. Abigail was sending messages, dozens of them, screenshots of conversations between her and David. I don't love her anymore. I haven't for a long time. We'll tell everyone after the divorce. You're the only one I want to be with. I can't wait to start our life together. Message after message appeared on my screen, each one a fresh knife in my heart. The timestamps showed conversations going back months. My husband and my sister plotting their future while I worked overtime on my projects, believing I was building our future together. I spent that night pacing through our house, no, my house, touching David's things and wondering if everything about our life together had been a lie. The signed jersey from his favorite football team that I'd given him for his birthday. The collection of sci-fi novels we'd read together. The framed photo from our honeymoon in Hawaii. Were any of those moments real? The first call from my parents came at 7 a.m. sharp. I let it ring 4 times before answering. You need to be reasonable about this, Dad started, not even bothering with a greeting. The sooner you agree to split the inheritance, the easier this will be for everyone. The casual arrogance in his voice made my blood boil. Easier for whom? For all of us, Mom chimed in. I was on speakerphone. You don't want this to get messy, dear. When? The word came out as barely more than a whisper. When did you know about them? There was a pause, the kind of hesitation that tells you everything you need to know before a word is spoken. We've known for a while, Mom finally admitted. David confided in us about 6 months before the accident. The timeline hit me like a physical blow. 6 months. They'd known for 6 months and still let me cry on their shoulders at his funeral. Still accepted my money every month while knowing what he and Abigail had done. Traitors, the word felt cold and final on my tongue. All of you. I hung up and blocked their numbers. My hand shook as I opened my banking app, but I didn't hesitate to cancel the monthly transfer to their account. Let them ask their precious Abigail for money. Next time I open Reddit, I'll update you all on what happens with the legal battle that's sure to come. Right now, I need to figure out how to keep breathing in a world where everything I thought I knew has turned out to be a lie. Update 1, 2 weeks have passed in a fog of missed calls and ignored text messages. Then came Abigail's email. She'd sue me if I didn't voluntarily give up half of everything. The word voluntarily had never looked so much like a threat. The whispers at work became unbearable. After breaking down during a client presentation, my team lead James suggested I take some time off. I packed up my desk that same afternoon and retreated into isolation. Groceries delivered, doorbell ignored, days spent staring at old photos searching for signs I must have missed. The news came via Facebook. Abigail had given birth to a boy. The photo showed her beaming in a hospital bed, our parents hovering proudly over their new grandson. I closed the app before reading the comments, but not before noticing she'd named him David Jr. A week later, the court summons arrived. Abigail was suing for half of everything David had left me, claiming her son's right to his father's inheritance. She wanted the house, half the money, and partial ownership of the downtown apartment. I found Thomas Bennett, highly recommended for handling complex inheritance cases. His assessment wasn't encouraging. Miss Wilson, he said, shuffling through the papers on his desk. I have to be honest. Your sister has compelling evidence, text messages, photos, witness statements including your own parents. He paused. In inheritance cases like this, proof of an intimate relationship combined with a biological child, the courts tend to be sympathetic. That evening, my phone rang, unknown number. Hello, is this Catherine Wilson? I'm Eleanor Parker. David's mother. The world tilted sideways. That's impossible, I whispered. David was an orphan. He told me his parents died when he was young. Another one of his lies, I'm afraid. Her voice was bitter but not unkind. Would you be willing to meet? There are things you need to know. We met at a small cafe downtown the next morning. The resemblance was uncanny. David had her eyes, her smile, even her graceful way of moving. I was at the funeral, she said after we'd settled into a corner booth. Back row, black dress and veil. I couldn't approach you then. David and I hadn't spoken in years. I remembered her, the solitary figure who'd slipped out early. I'd been too lost in grief to wonder who she was. Why are you coming forward now? I asked, suspicion clear in my voice. Eleanor pulled out a worn manila envelope. Because I've heard about what your sister is claiming, and I can't let another woman suffer from my son's lies. Inside were medical records from Boston General Hospital dated 10 years ago, before David and I married. Complete azoospermia. Permanently sterile. No possibility of natural conception. David had these tests done when he was 25, Eleanor explained softly. He was devastated. It was one of the last things we discussed before our falling out. I couldn't speak. All those years of fertility treatments, the endless doctor's appointments, the hormone injections, the tears and self-blame, it had all been a cruel charade. He never told you, did he? Eleanor's voice was gentle. About his condition? About why he really cut ties with his family? David had a pattern, she continued. He'd craft elaborate lies, create false narratives. When the truth started catching up, he'd move on, start fresh somewhere else. He told you he was an orphan because it was easier than explaining why he'd cut contact with his family. And I suspect he let you believe you were the reason you couldn't conceive because it was easier than admitting the truth about himself. She pulled out more documents, police reports, court filings. I've seen it before, with other women who claimed to be carrying David's child. None of their claims held up to DNA testing. I'm meeting with my lawyer tomorrow to discuss this new evidence. For the first time since the baby shower, I feel a glimmer of hope. The truth about David, both the lies he told me and the lies being told about him, is finally coming to light. I'll update again after we file our response to Abigail's lawsuit. Right now, I need to process everything Eleanor told me and figure out how to use this information to protect what's rightfully mine. Update 2, the courtroom was packed on the day of the hearing. Abigail sat in the front row, cradling baby David Jr., while our parents flanked her protectively. She'd dressed the part perfectly, demure black dress, minimal makeup, practiced look of sorrow. When she took the stand, she played to the gallery masterfully, tears glistening as she described her great love with David. All I want is what's fair for my son, she declared. He deserves his father's legacy. My lawyer, Mr. Bennett, waited until she'd finished before speaking. Your Honor, I'd like to submit evidence that proves Miss Thompson's entire claim is fraudulent. He approached the bench with the hospital records Eleanor had provided. Abigail's lawyer jumped up, objecting about chain of custody and document authenticity. Those documents are fake. Abigail shrieked. She forged them to steal my baby's inheritance. Your Honor, Mr. Bennett continued calmly, given these medical records show Mr. Wilson was sterile, we request a DNA test to establish paternity. That's impossible, Abigail said triumphantly. David was an orphan, and his body was cremated. Actually, Mr. Bennett gestured to the gallery, I'd like to introduce Eleanor Parker, David Wilson's biological mother. Eleanor stood, and a murmur ran through the courtroom. Abigail's face turned ashen. I'm willing to submit to a DNA test, Eleanor announced, to determine if this child is my grandson. The judge ordered the testing, and we reconvened 2 weeks later for the results. The results conclusively show, the judge announced, that there is no genetic relationship between the minor child and Mrs. Eleanor Parker. Therefore, it can be concluded that David Wilson was not the father of this child. Abigail broke down, mascara running down her cheeks. When the judge questioned her, she admitted everything. I was seeing several men at the time. When David died and was cremated, I thought no one would ever know, he had money, and I needed. The judge's ruling was swift. This court finds in favor of the defendant, Catherine Wilson. All claims to Wilson's estate by Abigail Thompson are dismissed with prejudice. Outside the courthouse, my parents tried one last time. Catherine, sweetheart, Mom reached for my hand. We had no idea Abigail was lying. We can make this right. We've been struggling since you stopped the monthly transfers. I held up my hand. Don't. I pulled out my phone, blocked their numbers, and walked away. Eleanor was waiting by my car. "Are you okay?" she asked softly. I surprised myself by laughing. "You know what? I think I actually am." I took a breath. I've been thinking about that apartment downtown that David left me. I never liked it much. Too many memories. But maybe you'd like it? Her eyes widened. "Catherine, no. Please," I insisted. "You gave me back my life with those medical records. Let me give you something in return." When I handed her the keys a week later, she broke down crying. "I never thought I'd have a daughter," she whispered as she hugged me. That was a month ago. My family still tries to reach me through mutual friends, but I've cut those ties. Abigail sent a letter claiming she's changed, that she's sorry, that she needs help with the baby. I threw it away unopened. Instead, I have weekly dinners with Eleanor. We're getting to know each other, sharing stories about David, the good and the bad. She's helping me see that while he wasn't the man I thought he was, that doesn't invalidate the happy moments we shared. Yesterday, I finally packed away David's things. Eleanor helped me donate some to charity and store others in the attic. As we worked, she told me stories about David as a little boy before the lies began. It helps somehow to know that version of him existed. I'm not ready to date yet, but I've started living again. I've returned to work, joined a hiking club, and am planning my first solo vacation. Life has a way of surprising you. I lost the family I was born into but gained a new one I never expected. It's not the life I planned, but maybe it's the life I was meant to have. I'll update one final time after I've had more time to process everything and figure out what comes next. Update 3. I wasn't planning on posting another update so soon, but I want to share how things have shifted in the past 3 months since the court case. Somehow, writing these posts has become part of my healing process. First, I should mention that Abigail has moved out of state. According to mutual friends, she's living with a distant aunt in Oregon. The baby's biological father apparently came forward after seeing the news about our court case in the local paper. He's a married business executive who's now paying child support but wants nothing else to do with the situation. My parents haven't given up trying to contact me. Last week, they showed up at my office unannounced. Security had to escort them out. Dad sent an email later that day, "We invested everything in your sister's gallery. Without your monthly support, we might lose the house. Please, just talk to us." I forwarded the email to my lawyer without responding. The house they might lose? They bought it with money I'd given them, thinking I was helping the family. Mr. Bennett is now investigating whether we can recover any of those funds, given they were obtained under false pretenses. The biggest change has been my relationship with Eleanor. What started as weekly dinners has evolved into something deeper. She's become the mother I always wanted but never had. Last month, she helped me restart my life in ways I never expected. "Catherine," she said during one of our dinners, "I have a proposition for you." She explained that she's part of a women's investment group that focuses on tech startups. "We could use someone with your expertise. Would you be interested in consulting?" I was hesitant at first, but Eleanor encouraged me to attend one of their meetings. It turned out to be exactly what I needed, a chance to use my skills while building something new, something completely separate from my old life with David. The group is currently evaluating several AI healthcare startups. My technical background combined with my experience navigating medical systems during those futile fertility treatments gives me a unique perspective. Last week, they offered me a permanent position as their technical advisor. I've also started therapy, something I should have done months ago. My therapist helped me understand that David's lies weren't a reflection of my worth. Some people, she explained, create elaborate facades because they can't bear to face their own truth. Your husband's deception says more about his struggles than your judgment. Eleanor has been remarkably open about David's history of deception. She shared stories of his childhood, how the lying started small, fabricated achievements at school, imaginary friends who took the blame for broken windows. As he grew older, the lies grew more sophisticated. He created entire false identities, borrowed money he never repaid, left a string of broken relationships across 3 states. I failed him, Eleanor admitted during one particularly emotional conversation. I saw the signs but didn't know how to help. By the time I realized how serious it was, he'd built such elaborate defenses that he couldn't accept help without admitting everything was a lie. Last weekend, Eleanor helped me clear out the last of David's things from the house. Among his papers, we found more evidence of his double life, credit cards I didn't know about, correspondence with women in other cities, even a half-completed application for a job in Singapore under a different name. Did you ever suspect? Eleanor asked as we sorted through the documents. I thought about the subtle inconsistencies in his stories, the way certain topics were off-limits, how he'd changed the subject when conversations got too personal. I think part of me knew something was off, I admitted. But I loved the version of him he showed me. Maybe I was afraid of looking too closely. Eleanor squeezed my hand. We all create idealized versions of the people we love. The trick is learning to love them even after we see the truth. The downtown apartment that I gave to Eleanor has become our Sunday brunch spot. We've started a tradition of trying new recipes together. Last week was Eggs Benedict, this week we're attempting homemade croissants. It's in these simple moments that I feel most at peace, like I'm finally building something real after years of living with illusions. Work has become my sanctuary. I've thrown myself into new projects, earning a reputation as someone who can spot patterns others miss. My team lead jokes that my experience with David made me better at detecting anomalies in code. He's probably right, after you've lived with a master of deception, inconsistencies tend to jump out at you. I'm not dating yet, but I'm no longer opposed to the idea. My therapist says there's no timeline for healing, and I'm learning to trust that. For now, I'm focusing on rebuilding my life on my own terms. Yesterday, I received another letter from Abigail. Unlike the others, this one contained a check, a partial repayment of the money she'd borrowed over the years. The amount was small, but the gesture meant something. I haven't decided whether to cash it. Eleanor says I should view it as Abigail's attempt at amends, but I'm not ready for forgiveness. Some bridges, once burned, should stay ashes. I'm learning that it's okay to close certain chapters of your life without a neat resolution. As for what's next, I'm considering taking a sabbatical to travel. Eleanor's investment group has connections in several tech hubs across Europe, and they've suggested I could combine work with exploration. The idea of starting fresh somewhere new, where nobody knows my story, is appealing. Life isn't what I expected, but maybe that's not a bad thing. I'm stronger than I knew, more resilient than I imagined. The woman who started writing these posts 6 months ago was looking for answers. What I found instead was something better, the truth about my past and the freedom to choose my future. This will be my last update. Thank you all for being part of my journey. Sometimes the family you choose is better than the one you're born into, and the life you build from the ashes of betrayal can be more authentic than the one built on comfortable lies.